1 second. 1 second. Today we're going to be building the Print and Play 3D printed mini arcade cabinet, and I've been meaning to build one of these for a while. First and foremost, if you don't know who James is over at Print and Play, you need to know him. I'm going to leave all of his information in the description below. He did a fantastic job on this project, and you should check out his build videos for this cabinet as well. Now let's get a closer look at this thing. James designed this whole thing from scratch. The printed parts are large, but they're pretty easy to print. There's a couple different control surfaces that come with different button configurations. You can get up to 6, I believe. It has stereo audio, a 7-inch display, and the whole thing is powered with an Orange Pi running retro Orange Pi software. Now right out of the gate, I'm going to tell you that this build isn't all that easy, and it took me a while to put it together. It took me so long that I'm actually going to break this build up into 2 videos. Wait, have we done 2 videos before? So yeah, 2 videos. The first one, I'll show you all the stuff that we need to put it together. We'll get it mocked up and make sure everything works. And the second one, we'll do the finish install and put it all together, and then we'll have our cabinet. Now I did make some mistakes along the way with some soldering and screw sizes, but as usual, I'll leave you notes on the screen as to what I did differently. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's get to this build. Here's all the printed parts you'll need. This is all done in Protopasta. This color is Stardust with silver glitter. And the purple color is Galactic Empire Metallic Purple. You'll need a controller panel. I'm going with the 2-button one because that's just fine for most of the games that I want to play, but James has a couple different versions out there with multiple button holes. A rear I/O panel, you can either get it with or without the power switch. We're going to use the power switch, so that's this one. You have the lower body. This is the version that fits the Orange Pi that we're going to use, the one that James uses. We have the rear hatch, the upper body. This is the screen bezel, the LCD controller mount, and one of these marquee bezels. I printed one out in each color just to pick which one I liked best. And here's a look at all the non-printed parts you'll need. There is a bunch of them. Fortunately, James does provide a bill of materials. I will leave a link in that in the description, but let's just run through them real fast. We have a 7-inch LCD display with the board and the buttons that you need to control it. This all comes in a kit. We have a 5-volt power supply. We have some power buttons. We have an Orange Pi. You can also use a Raspberry Pi. You can probably use other things, but I'm sticking with the plans that James laid out, so we're going with the Orange Pi for this one. We have a couple of speakers. We have a USB gamepad encoder. This is what allows you to take all the button movements and convert it to USB. We have a joystick. We have a short LED USB powered light strip for our marquee. We'll need a micro SD card. I'm going to use a 16 gig. We'll need some arcade style buttons. I just grabbed 2 packs of 5. Some power jacks, I just bought a bunch because these are great for other projects. This is so you can plug in your DC power adapter. A headphone cable, an HDMI cable, an audio amplifier board. It has a little volume knob on it. We'll need some female to female jumper wires, a few header pins, and some heat sinks to go on our Orange Pi to keep it cool. We'll also need a couple of screws. These are M2.5 by 6mm to hold the controller plate down, and a couple of M3 by 25mm with some lock nuts to hold the joystick in place. So let's get started with setting up the Retro Orange Pi. So we'll just go to retroorangepi.org. We'll head to Downloads, and we have the Orange Pi PC, this one right here. Just be aware that download is pretty good size. It's 1.2 gig. Download is complete. Let's head to Downloads. The file that it downloads is a 7-zip file, so you're going to need 7-zip to extract it. We can download it here. We'll install it. It's a real quick install. We can close that. Now if we head to Downloads, we can right-click on that file, 7-zip, and we're going to extract to the file name as a folder. The file's been extracted. Here's our image file right in here. Let's go ahead and mount our SD card. SD card's in. Now we can use Win32 Disk Imager to load that image onto the card. Link in the description if you don't have it already. eDrive is our SD card. We'll open the image file we just extracted right here, hit open, and hit write. This will wipe everything out on the card, so be sure you want to do this, and it'll write the image. This will take a moment. The SD card write was successful. I'm going to go ahead and remove it and load it in my Orange Pi, and then come back later and worry about games. I'm going to mock everything up for now, and then hopefully we can load some ROMs with a USB key. We'll see how that goes. So hit OK. Come down here just to be safe. Right click and eject. Now we can pull out our SD card. And then we'll go ahead and load it into our Orange Pi. And before we power it on, let's go ahead and throw our heatsink on the chip, just for good measure. We'll set that aside for a moment. Now let's work on our controller panel. Again, I'm just going to use the 2-button control panel, because that's all the games I really want to play. Mostly Atari games and first-gen Nintendo, but he has a bunch of these out there for multiple buttons. So you can use as many as 6, I believe. But this one's going to be good enough for my build. So we'll load some buttons in here. I'm just going to put 2. And then we can mount our joystick. So the joystick I ordered came with a wrong colored knob. I thought I ordered it to match these, but that's not quite right. So I'll probably 3D print one that's a little closer to that, but this will work for now. I'm going to put the slide washer on top of the joystick and then mount it like this. The plug will be facing inward so I can route those wires a little easier. I'm going to use some M3 by 12mm screws on these and some washers. You don't have to tighten it up right now. We need to adjust it just a little bit and get it square. Now that they're snug, we can kind of square it up and make sure the directions look good. I think that's about right. So now I'll go ahead and snug up those screws. So that's good. You can go ahead and throw your knob on now if you want to. So the wires that came with the encoder, you can go ahead and cable up your buttons. Doesn't really matter which post it goes on, but you want to make sure that this side goes to the side with the design on the pin. So just like this. If you don't put them on the right direction, it can be kind of hard to get them off. But go ahead and cable all the buttons up. And then on the base, I'm going to go ahead and do 3 buttons. I'm going to do select, start, and I think they call it an enable button. It has to do with using the software. You need this to be able to use the software, so we'll make that one here. Again, hook up your wires. It doesn't matter which post you use. There's all the wires for the base. Now we've got all the wires plugged into the buttons on the controller and the buttons in the case. They can go anywhere in any of these slots right here. It doesn't matter because we're going to assign them during the install. So just plug them all in anywhere. Just like that, there's my 5 buttons. Now we can cable up the joystick with this 5-pin cable. Most of the time the joysticks come with these, but sometimes they don't. But you can usually use DuPont connectors to substitute for this. It's just a straight through cable. We'll go ahead and plug that into this slot. Also, if your joystick doesn't have this plug and it has individual switches, you can use these 4 plugs over here instead. Now on the joystick side, your cable should go right like this. Now our controller's pretty much done. You can go ahead and set this on here for now. We do have to cable it up USB to the Orange Pi. We'll do that in a minute. Now we need to work on setting up our screen. Let's go ahead and take that film off. Also satisfying. And our screen controller board, you just want to make sure these connections are facing up, and it'll slide into this header right here. This is the locking bar for that header. Just make sure that it's up, and then slide these in very carefully. Like so, and then you can lock down that bar. Just push it down. And then we can hook up our HDMI cable to our Orange Pi. So we'll plug it in right here, and then on the Orange Pi right there. And then we need some power for our screen. That's going to be provided USB from our Orange Pi. So we'll plug in our adapter right here. And then that will run to the DC jack right here. And then we'll bring our controller in. It's also USB. We'll plug it into the Orange Pi, like so. And I'm not sure if the DC adapter for an Orange Pi is in the build list or not, but it is very handy to have when working with an Orange Pi. We're going to test this setup with this adapter. In the official build, we're going to power it off the GPIO pins, but this is good for testing for now. So we're going to plug it in and make sure it boots up. Power up the Orange Pi from this adapter right here. We should have a green light on the Pi. Looks like the screen is coming up. That's a great sign. So the first time you start this thing up, it's going to boot and install, and it's going to take a while to get to this screen. But eventually we're going to have to configure the controller. Just let it go ahead and install. It has detected that we have a gamepad, so that's a good sign. So go ahead and hit one button and hold it to start the configuration. And now we're going to go through a list and configure all the directions and the buttons we want to use. So at the top one, we just push up on the directional, and then we push down, then we push left, push right. And then for the start button, I'm going to use one of the ones on the console down below, one of the black buttons. And then select, same one right next to it. I'm going to set mine up like a Nintendo controller, so the A button is going to be the button on the right, and then the B button is going to be the button on the left. And that's all the buttons I want to set up. So we can just push any button to cycle through all these. I'm just going to use the down button. Just hold it, and it'll run through it. And then the very last one, this is that hotkey enable button I was talking about. I'm going to use that single button on the base on the right, that bottom black one. I'm just going to use that as the enable key. So we should be good. You can just hit any button on the OK to continue. And now we're booted up into the console. You can see you can flip through all the different emulators with your joystick. We don't have any games yet, but it looks like everything's working. So before we upload any games, let's talk about that for a second. Now for your arcade cabinet, the games are called ROMs, and there's a ton of ROMs available on the internet. And these cabinets can pretty much emulate any game system. But the problem, there's a lot of copyright issues involved with those games. But there are public domain games that you can play for free, so that shouldn't be a problem, and I'm going to show you how to install one of those during this tutorial. Now with ROMs or anything emulated, there's going to be some issues occasionally where some just don't work, or some don't work for certain systems, so you might have some bad ones and you might run into some issues while installing them. Now, I'm going to install these a certain way. There's probably easier ways like hooking up to the network or getting a computer that has Wi-Fi on it that's really easy to use. I'm going to use a USB key, and you'll probably only want to run through this install once. So I suggest if you're building one of these, get a ROM set. Get all the ROMs that you want to play on your arcade cabinet, load them the first time, and be done with it. Now I'll walk you through all the steps to get this ROM uploaded. So there's a lot of great sites out there that'll show you how to get public domain ROMs. This is just one I found, and I'm going to use their second method here. There's lists of public domain ROMs. And let's grab one for the NES. So we'll just hit available ROMs. Again, some of these are kind of hit and miss whether they work or not. You might just have to try a few out. But I'm going to go for Bomb Sweeper. We'll just hit download. And it's going to kick out a zip file. You don't need to unzip this file. We want to keep it zipped. So I'm going to plug in a USB drive to my USB port. We'll open up Explorer. I'm just going to right click on my USB drive. I'm going to format it really quick. You just want to make sure you're FAT32 so it'll read it. Hit start, quick format's fine. That's complete, we can close this. And we'll just drag the zip file that we downloaded onto our USB key. Downloads, Bomb Sweeper, and we'll put it on our USB drive. And that's all we should have to do. We can go ahead and unplug our USB drive. So the game's on the USB drive, and this is where it gets tricky. So we're going to have to use the controller to get into the desktop environment that's available in the Retro Orange Pi software. And then I'm going to unplug the controller, plug the mouse in from my computer and the USB drive, use the mouse to drag that software into the correct folder, unplug those, plug the controller back in, and restart it so that we can play the game. That's why you probably only want to do this process once, but I'll walk you through step by step. So the controller's still plugged in. We're going to hit the start button. We're going to go down one to desktop and hit the A button. Are you sure? Yes. That's going to bring up the Retro Orange Pi desktop environment. We're then going to unplug our controller. We'll plug in our USB drive that has our ROM on it. And then I'm going to plug in the mouse that I use on this computer just because it makes this process so much easier. And hopefully you can see that. I'm going to collapse the keyboard right here. We want to open up the File Explorer up here at the top left. And then we'll open up our USB drive. Just single click that. There's our game. We'll right click on it, hit copy, and then we'll go to the file system, and we want to go to Home, Pi, Retro Pi, and then we go to ROMs, and then we need to find the system that this game is emulated on. So this one is the NES. So we'll scroll down to that one. That's this one right here. We can just paste our ROM right there. And then we can go over to this side and restart the emulation station. Now that your game is copied, you can move your USB drive and your mouse and plug your controller back in. Back to the screen. Let's go ahead and restart it one more time. We'll go up to quit with the controller, hit the A button. Just go down to restart emulation station. A button, yes. It'll kick it over one more time. And these are hard to see over here, but you can just scroll down through all the emulators. We want to go down to Nintendo. Right there. Hit the A button to go into that emulator. And your games are going to be listed over here on the right. There's Bomb Sweeper. We'll go down to select it, hit the A button. It's going to start the ROM up, and the game is started. We'll just select Game A, and we'll hit the Start button. And now you can play your game. And video 1 is done. We got it all mocked up, and we got our game working. Next video, everything will start looking a lot more like this guy. A big thanks to James over at Print and Play again. This is a great design and this build has been a lot of fun. Check him out in all the information below. I hope you liked this video or you found it helpful. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing to my channel. If not, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video, and if you'll excuse me,